Once a woman sent her lover the following letter. Consider how pleased Jane must have felt to write this to her lover John. And I'm sure John felt very excited to read it. Dear John, never a good start. I want a man who knows what love is all about. You are generous and kind and thoughtful. People who are not like you admit to being useless and inferior. You have ruined me for other men. I yearn for you. I have no feelings whatsoever when we're apart. I can be forever happy. Will you let me be yours? Jane. Now, that's a beautiful letter. Unfortunately, Jane had worse punctuation than this rabbi, and Jane didn't punctuate properly, and John started to have to figure out where the commas went and the periods went and the emphasis went, and he read the exact same letter, but what did John read? Dear John, I want a man who knows what love is. All about you are generous, kind, thoughtful people who are not like you. Admit to being useless and inferior. You have ruined me. For other men I yearn. I have no feelings whatsoever. When we're apart, I can be forever happy. Will you let me be? Yours, Jane. The same words, the same author, the same reader. Nothing major has changed except a little comma here, a semicolon there, emphasis on this word and not on another word. And so the story goes. Obviously, this is a fictitious letter. It was composed by somebody who was brilliant, wanting to make a point. This was not my letter. I did not create it. I'm not that good with the English language or the Hebrew language. A friend of mine once said, we went to rabbinical school, and instead of becoming bilingual, we became semi-lingual in two different languages, right? So I'm semi-lingual in two different languages, and my grammar, my punctuation, forget about it. But the essence of the message is true, no matter what. Right? And you can imagine one-time lovers having a falling out, a falling apart through not communicating properly, those commas and semicolons and periods, adding up slowly, the minor slights and the Hertz and the insignificant, seemingly insignificant details of a relationship, unattended, left unaddressed, build up, slowly over time, boiling over, ultimately erupting into what amounts to, oftentimes in relationship, World War III, right? Of course we can imagine it because we've all had this done to us, and we've all done this to somebody else because we're all immersed, enmeshed within relationships, right? Daily, I encounter it, you encounter it, we encounter it in a myriad of forms, right? The email letter that you get that is in all caps, and of course, what are they doing? They're yelling at you. They're yelling at me. That's what I hear when I read these all caps. Well, stop yelling at me. But the truth is, maybe they're not yelling. Maybe, like my booby, she just hit the all caps and couldn't figure out how to uncapitalize it. It wasn't personal, but I took it personally. Booby, stop yelling at me. Maybe we send this long text. Has this ever happened to you? Send a long text, a long email, and all you get back is a one-word response. Nudge, nudge, Barry, right? Maybe it was just, that's how Barry operates. It was just one word, and oftentimes that's how most men operate. One word, yes or no, but not hearing the message behind the message, not understanding that what was being asked for was more than a one-word response, or even worse, no response. And then we're in our head and wondering, is this on purpose? Is this a tactic, a strategy? Is this how they're going to play it, right? And we start playing out this drama in our head, and what was insignificant email or text message or even letter really does turn into a Dear John letter, and it's the beginning of the end. Our lives are filled with these examples of these, of emails and texting and phone conversations that go like this, or real-time conversations, reading or misreading body language, or listening to hearsay or gossip, assumptions and prejudgments and preconceptions and misconceptions and misunderstandings. The list goes on and on. Relationships rise and fall more often than not on the big monumental moments, not just on the big betrayals or hurts, but oftentimes on the seemingly insignificant commas and semicolons and details that go unattended, that go unaddressed. I've spoken about this numerous times. I imagine I will continue to speak about it until the end of my days, because that's what we do as Jews, right? Our religion isn't esoteric. It's not made for a mountaintop. It's made for a valley where people dwell, where people live. This is a real life religion for people struggling through their lives. And in no area do we struggle more than relationships. Our greatest simchas, joys, as we just experienced, happen in relationships, and our greatest sorrow, suffering, oftentimes comes with relationships. And as one of the wisdom texts in our tradition says, Ein chadash tachat hashemesh. However, we can draw great comfort from knowing that there is nothing new under the sun. Even though it's the 21st century, even though it seems like we're different, we're no different than Nadav and Avihu, who were in this week's Torah portion. Nadav and Avihu, as I'm sure you remember, were Aaron's sons. Nadav and Avihu were supposed to step up and take their father Aaron and his place in the Beit Mikdash, in the holy temple. They were the Kohanim, the high priests, and only they were allowed to enter into the Kodesh Kodeshim, the Holy of Holies, and only they were allowed to engage in this ancient, strange ritual, which we're not exactly sure what it was. And it was passed down from father to son, but they knew what it was. And they were supposed to do it and do it right. But something went awry in today's Torah portion. And Nadav and Avihu, the sons of Aaron, each took their own censer, their own fire pan, and put fire in it, put incense on it, and offered Eish Zarah. We're not sure what this is, but it's called strange fire. Whatever it is, it ain't good. Because why? God didn't command it, and then a fire went out from the Lord and devoured them on the spot. Right? You don't have to be a halachic master, a Jewish legal master, to know that whatever they offered wasn't good. Why? Because God kills them on the spot. So the rabbis want to know, what exactly did Nadav and Avihu do that was so wrong? And there is infinite speculation. There isn't one answer. Of course, 2 Jews, 3 opinions. There's opinion after opinion after opinion all throughout the Talmudic tradition and to this very day. And there's some very interesting opinions. A popular opinion is that they went in drunk, right? They were drunk and they were stumbling around in the Holy of Holies, and maybe that's acceptable. No, it's a mitzvah on Purim, but that's not something you do on Yom Kippur and in the Holy of Holies of all places. Maybe they were just arrogant, and they seem to be arrogant, right? Each one kind of trying to one-up the other. There seems to be a competitive nature if you study the text closely. Maybe they didn't respect their father Aaron. Maybe they didn't listen to the actual words of what he taught them. Maybe they did exactly what he said, but they didn't do it with the right spirit. We don't know exactly what they did. Excuse me. And I'm always left wanting a better explanation, a more inspiring explanation to this pretty profound moment. So I was searching among the texts, and I found this great teaching by a Rabbi Slater. I don't know him, but he synthesized many of these ideas. What did Nadav and Avihu do wrong that day? More than the particular behaviors cited, says Rabbi Slater, it's the fact that Nadav and Avihu were not connected, right? They were disconnected. That was their downfall. They were disconnected from the world. These two chose not to marry. They were bachelors, and there was a problem with that in serving in the temple. To be a full rabbi, at least back in the day, you had to be married. You had to commit yourself to another person. You had to have children. You had to be grounded in the real world, or else you become disconnected, right? So they were disconnected. They were disconnected from not only their father Aaron and their mother, but their elders of their tradition. They were disconnected from the seniors and disrespectful of the seniors of that day. They were disconnected from one another. I know it's hard to believe. Brothers vying for position, competing with one another, one-upsmanship, trying to outshine the other. They were disconnected from their community. They were disconnected from God. They were disconnected. That was the point, right? They were disconnected. And when you are literally disconnected, I mean, think about it, even on a phone conversation. How frustrating is it when you're trying to make a call at Shirat Hayim, and you make a call, and you connect, and it gets dropped, and you connect, and it gets dropped. We're working on that, by the way. Hopefully that'll be remedied very soon, and we'll never be disconnected again. But there is a feeling of disconnect when that call is dropped, and it's the worst feeling in the world, by the way, when you keep talking, and there's nobody on the other line. or you call back and they didn't even know you weren't on the line, basically. So there's a feeling of disconnect and of not listening in that element that is very clear and comes through loud and clear with Nadav and Avihu. But this comes through loud and clear all throughout the Torah, this disconnect, this not listening, or lo shama, we say in Hebrew. We see it from the very first story, Adam and Eve, right? God gives Adam and Eve a very clear set of instructions. Do anything you want. Don't eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And of course, they eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, fine. They already are not listening to God. But then God comes calling and says, Ayeka, where are you? Right? He's not zapping them dead. He's giving them a chance to enter into a conversation, but they're not listening. They're concocting excuses in their head. They're blaming it on each other. They're trying to figure a way out of this scenario. They're not listening to what God was asking. Where are you? Fast forward to Noah. I've shared this many times. Noah follows every letter of the law. Noah builds that ark. Noah does exactly what God said, but he misses what God meant. He's not listening to what's beneath the text, right? What's beneath the actual literal words that God is sharing. And over again throughout Genesis and into the Exodus, we see this as a theme. We just finished Passover. We just read the Exodus. We talked about it around our Seder tables. What is striking about it is how nobody is listening to each other in the story of the Exodus. Over and over again, you have individuals not listening. First, it begins with Moses. God comes to Moses and says, I have a job. Moses says, no, thank you. But no, I have a job. I'm not really asking you. I'm telling you. Thank you, but no, thank you. It's this process of Moses arguing with God, not wanting to take the job, and then saying, if I take the job, nobody's going to believe me. Nobody's going to listen to me. V'lo yishmu b'koli. They're not going to listen to me, even if I take this job. So God says, don't worry. Even though you're not listening, they'll listen. Moses goes to the Israelites and he speaks to them, and what does it say? V'lo shamu el Moshe mikotze ruach ve'avodah kasha. He was right. The Israelites are not listening because they are incapable of listening. And each and every step of the way on the journey to Israel, they're not listening. And worst of all, there's Pharaoh, who we read about at the Passover Seder, of course. Pharaoh, time and again, Moses comes to him, and God comes to him, and his advisors come to him, and time and again it says, Lo shama, lo shama, lo shama, and Pharaoh did not listen. To the point where Dr. Zornberg says, teacher of mine, in not listening, lo shama, he hardens himself, making himself ultimately incapable of hearing. He has put himself beyond the possibility of change. Pharaoh is ultimately imprisoned at a certain point within his own choice, lo shama, of not listening. If you don't listen for long enough, eventually it becomes a muscle. And we start strengthening it so much, this inability to listen, that we shut out anything and everything around us that once we had heard, we no longer can hear. And this is the Passover story. And this is what we talked about 2 weeks ago. This is the second part of a conversation we began 2 weeks ago about what is the mitzvah Passover. And I spoke about the mitzvah being summed up in the word Pesach, the Hebrew word for Passover. The rabbis say Pesach is two words, pe, the mouth, sach, sicha, that speaks. Passover is a holiday where we show up and where we speak, right? And it is a mitzvah to speak around the Seder table. It is a commandment to speak and speak long into the night about what? About anything, about everything. Yes, the Haggadah. We read from the Haggadah. Haggadah literally means lahagid, to speak. The whole point of the Seder is to create a pretext to bring family together and to bring community together, to get us to Pesach, to open our mouths and speak. Because the greatest danger in a family or in a community or in a relationship is when we stop speaking. Or think about the 4 children, right? The wicked child, the Russia. Why is he wicked? Not because he hates Hebrew school. Why is he wicked? Not because he does anything explicitly bad. He's wicked, according to the text, because he distances himself from the conversation. He removes himself from the conversation. There is a disconnect, and that's the beginning of the end. And the saddest of all of the children is the one who doesn't even know how to ask a question, the one who doesn't know how to speak. And so what is our job? I spoke about this 2 weeks ago, to inspire that child to find the words, the questions, and to teach him or her how to speak. That's what Passover is about. It is about returning to a relationship and reminding ourselves of the mitzvah of speaking up, of speaking out, of speaking our truth. But that's only half the equation. Because as a teacher of mine once said to me as I was just talking at him and not to him, I'm happy to listen if you want this to be a monologue, but if you want it to be a dialogue, you're going to have to stop talking at some point, right? If we want to be in a dialogue, if we want to be in a relationship, then we have to remember the other side of the equation. It is a mitzvah to speak, but it is also a mitzvah to listen. And that's why our tradition is built around the mantra of Shema Yisrael. Listen, Israel, right? Speaking is half of the equation of Passover, but Shema Yisrael, listening, is also a prerequisite. And when we don't listen, right, we do great damage in the lives of those we love. Because oftentimes, what they are not asking us is to read a text or an email or a letter or even just listen to the words coming out of our mouth. What are they asking us? They want us to receive them, who they are and what they're about. I know we have to wrap it up, but I'm going to share with you a teaching from Rabbi Mark Gaffney in a book called Soul Prints. He writes about his son Eitan. Eitan is a great philosopher. He's only 13 years old, and he stopped me at the door one day as I was running out on a tour. I was heading out for a tour to the United States. I live in Israel, and he was going on a speaking tour. At the door of my house in Israel, Eitan grabs me and says, Abba, Daddy, Daddy, take this with you, and he hands him something. Rabbi Gaffney gives his son a kiss, says goodbye. He gets back 3 weeks later, and Eitan, who told him to look into the box, says, did you look into the box? It's 11 o'clock at night, and he didn't even have time to lie. And he said very sadly to Eitan, no, I didn't look in the box. And tears started rolling down little Eitan's cheeks. And I said, Eitan, please give me another chance. And I ran into the car, and I looked at the bottom of my luggage, and I got what he had given me, a sort of shoebox. And I said, Eitan, what's this? He said, Abba, open it. Daddy, open it. So we opened it together, and in it there was an old faded picture of me, something of his mom's, a rock, a seashell, something from our first home, a few other things that were near and dear to him. I said, Eitan, what is this? And I shiver as I remember what Eitan said to me. He said, Daddy, these are my things. I gave them to you, and you didn't receive them. We all have a box of stuff. We all have a place within us that is ours and only ours to share, and we all spend our life trying to hand to other people courageously, bravely. It takes tremendous courage to offer that box of heartfelt feelings and prayers and love to another person. And all we want in this lifetime is to have that box received and taken in and appreciated and made their own. So as we move forward in our lives, the next time we get that email or that text or that letter or entered into the conversation, maybe we should remember this idea of Shema Yisrael, right? Listen to what is really being written. Shema Yisrael, listen to what is really being conveyed. Shema Yisrael, listen to what is trying to be shared. Shema Yisrael, listen, not just hearing, but listening, and most of all, learning how to receive. That's why we're here. That's what we do. And I'll end with this. The Talmud says, God gave us 7 holes in our head for a reason. So we can take in information through 7 holes in our head, but we can only give out information through one of those holes in our head. We should listen 7 times more than we speak. Shabbat Shalom.